All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Face of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am excited for our guest today because we've got Dave Newell here today from the president and founder of Evolve Leadership Consulting. And he's going to be talking today about transforming business chaos into a dance of success. Dave, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, this is going to be great, man, because it's always cool talking with people that they're really into business and helping people, put the right people in the right places and make things work. So, Dave, we always like to start out a little bit. My security system went off there, so we're back at it again. But we always like to start out by talking about what really called you into doing this. How did you get into doing this and helping people and in leadership coaching?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. Everybody I think has a unique journey into the consulting space. A lot of people, come from a corporate space or they, entered into it postgraduate. I actually came at it from a community organizing and higher education perspective. So where I first got into it was kind of bringing disparate groups together. An environmental agency working with a government agency, working with local farmers to clean up a watershed. Traditionally three groups that don't get along very well or don't always play nicely in the sand, so to speak. Yeah. And so I really learned kind of the lessons of what we call alignment, with the lessons of alignment pretty early in engaging different groups with different perspectives, different ways of thinking about things. That kind of transformed into teaching and education, into the higher education space. And in 2012, I had the good fortune of kind of taking on as a side gig some consulting work. And, within 30 seconds of being in a consulting engagement, I was like, ooh, I like this. This is the thing I want to do. Right. It was kind of the culmination of all the different experiences that I had. There's a teaching aspect, there's an alignment, there's a problem solving, like kind of all the things. But what I got to see was in a business setting, just rapid change, just rapid movement. You could see somebody go from being burned out, frustrated, torn down in their work environment, just, like we can't solve this problem, kind of swimming in complex situations to, you put a tool in place, a process in place, you adjust the behavior, think about something a little differently. And it's like, man, their weeks, their lives got better pretty fast. And I really got, kind of addicted to that, to the experience. Like I really love seeing the transformation that you can make in a business and people's lives relatively quickly on the consulting side. And that has always been the driver and motivator for me.
So did you contemplate doing the consulting beforehand? I mean, or did it just kind of come to you and go, wow, this is something I never thought about, but I really enjoy?
Yeah, no, honestly, I never thought about it. My mom was an elementary music teacher and my dad, worked for the government. They worked these really stable, kind of consistent jobs. And we were taught, as Midwestern kids, we were taught like, put your head down, work hard, stay in the job and, effort. And I think I had really good role models, but entrepreneurship was not really a thing that we considered or just had in our sphere. And I got after it a little bit later in life, but the more, I kind of got exposed to it, the more I was like, oh, these are my people, right? Like people who want to build things, people who are kind of pushing into spaces. And I just got more and more attracted to that community. And I've had the good fortune of just, being blessed by all sorts of dynamic and interesting relationships over the last, 10, 15 years of being in that space. There's just a lot of really smart, really passionate, great people who are in this space. And so I'm beyond blessed to be where I am, for sure.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
So you like you said, you've been doing this a number of years, and you've developed a process you think is called the 5 Facets of Business. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that framework and just talking about the end of that a little bit more would be really cool.
Yeah. This process is something that's probably a decade in the making, but a year into the public sphere, so to speak. Like we essentially launched it in November, but it's something that we've been doing for a long time. And really the idea here, our purpose statement is to align the misaligned. And this goes back to my, kind of community organizing days, and alignment has always been our mission, right? Like what we see in businesses is they're often approaching symptoms, like the things you can see, right? So communication breakdowns, disgruntled employees, people not getting their stuff done on time, leads aren't coming in. Like those are all outputs of things. Those are all symptoms that we're seeing. And what we've really been about since we got into this process is the systems approach to the symptoms that you're seeing. And so the Five Facets is really about creating what we call kind of business velocity.
Mm.
And the idea of, people talk about speed, they talk about going
Yeah.
fast, but velocity is different than speed. Velocity becomes direction. It's speed with direction awareness, right? Velocity is direction aware, meaning we are going from one place to the next place. And so we take a systems approach to doing that. In the Five Facets, we look at 5 operating systems in your business. We look at culture, strategy, operations, story, which is sales and marketing, and finance. What we often see in organizations is they're thinking about one of those things. So, hey, our leads are down, we need to fix sales. And then they start fixing sales, and then they start getting more leads in, and they're like, oh, we have an operations problem. We can't get things out on time. And then that creates a culture problem. And then that doesn't match with their strategy, and it creates a financial, right? So it's like you just see this, like we're kind of dealing with symptoms all the time. And what it's doing is like we're going fast to go fast. We're reacting. We're adjusting on the fly. Like we're hustling. We're doing all those things. And what we're saying is, hey, slow down, take a minute. Let's put those 5 systems all moving in the same direction. And when those 5 systems move in the same direction, you actually achieve velocity, which is elevated client experience, clear operations, clear story, effective financial management. Like all those systems start moving in the same direction. We've seen businesses transform. I won't say it's a quick fix. It's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
It's not really the intent. But I've seen businesses transform over a few years, and I can provide you some examples. But that's generally the idea behind it.
Yeah. So how did you land on these five facets?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's other systems like EOS or scaling up, like kind of systems approaches to business practice. Like we're not the inventors of that in a space by any means. And they similar to the Five Facets, they really focus on some core ways of thinking about your business, but they also focus on, hey, let's put these systems in place in different spaces. And we've always been kind of in the system space. And I'll give you kind of a concrete example of how this worked. So in 2018, I was brought into a manufacturing client here in North Carolina, and I was brought in for culture reasons. So, they were like, well, we've got these values, but we're not really living these values. And they had 34 employees, and 13 of them were on the chopping block, essentially. Like 13 of them were, hey, these are disgruntled, unhappy employees. We're kind of thinking, we should do some coaching or we should do some culture work with these folks. And as I was thinking about that, I'm like, it seems weird to me that a third of your workforce is on the chopping block. Like something else is going on here. And so that's kind of a good example of like looking at the symptom and saying, well, we need to fix these people, right? It's like, well, no, you're creating the conditions for these people to behave the way that they are. So we zoomed out a little bit. We actually interviewed all 34 people in the company, and we do a process called causal mapping, which came out of MIT in the late 80s, early 90s, Peter Senge's work. But causal mapping looks at causation. And this is how we start every engagement. Really what we're looking for is what are the linchpin engagements, what are the linchpin activities that will create the most positive movement for you as quick as possible. So we asked 2 questions in those interviews. We asked, what's in the way? So when it comes to doing your work, what gets in the way? And that's the question we care the most about. But the second question then is also, what opportunities do you see? We take that information, we identify themes, and then we look at causation amongst those themes. So let's say there's 10 things. We're saying, okay, well, which one of these comes first? What we identified in this organization, and they coined this term for me, is they said, we have a grab and blame culture, meaning we grab credit and we blame the other department if something goes wrong. They had undocumented processes and they didn't have a shared vision. So what that meant to us is they have 7 different departments. None of the departments knew what the other departments did from a process perspective. So if one shifted, they changed their process. You could just watch the trickle effect happen where it would break down every step of the line. So instead of doing coaching and kind of direct culture work, we formed what we call the coalition. So the coalition was a member or two of each of the departments, and we brought them together to document processes together. We essentially said, all right, project management, what do you do? Engineering, what do you do? Production, parts, etc., like shipping, kind of like, what do you do? And let's have
Yeah.
other people give feedback. Let's have other people share those things. And they had a 14-week production process that was taking them 16 weeks. They made industrial screw driving systems.
Mm-hmm.
And within 2 months of documenting processes, they cut 2 weeks off the production time and went to one person on the chopping block. But that person was just an exception, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's an example of what you see is not always kind of what's going on, right? And so
Yeah.
what that shows me is, yeah, you can talk about a disgruntled culture or a frustrating culture to be in, like you've got, this grab and blame culture.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but that's not like that's the output, that's the thing you're seeing, but really it was an
Yeah.
operations, process, documentation, team communication problem. We can fix this thing over here, and you just see it permeate every aspect of the business. And I think it's a good example of the weave, right? So when we think about those 5 things, culture, strategy, operations, story, and finance, it's like those are just the 5 major aspects of any business. Like you have to have those 5 things
Yes.
effectively happening in any business that you're a part of. And what we look for is, where do they connect? Where's the weave? Where's one maybe causing a problem somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a good point, because even you go back through the decades, and they talk about the challenges happen at the intersection of departments where people have to work together, and that was a great example of it. That um, it's them, not us. It's all the different kind of things that you run into in those situations. But as you're building this out now, you said you. Just started really releasing the 5 facets of business to the world last fall, but there's a lot of research that came up to that. So I'm curious about that. A lot of research, a lot of work, and the things like that. What were you finding prior to this that you're like, it's just not here? Because you brought it up. There's EOS, there's scaling up, there's all these different predictable success. You can talk to profit first. There's all these people that have their system that's going to run your, help you run your business. But what were some of the things that you were seeing that really caused you or got you to think about, hey, I think this might be a little bit different?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, in probably 2014 is when I first got into kind of the organizational development side of the consulting world, where I was really kind of taking on a business as an operating system. And EOS was a system I leveraged quite a bit. Like I used the tools and the systems and the ways of thinking. It's great. There's nothing wrong with that system.
Yeah.
But it's also not for everybody. And scaling up is kind of the same way, right? Like what I found is probably 50% of my kind of initial client base were people that tried to implement EOS and it didn't go well. Right. So, it totally works for certain folks. It totally works with a certain type of business. And it is really powerful. It's really impactful. But what I've found is it's kind of it's a great place to start for people who have zero structure in place, right?
Yeah.
Like let's get some systems in place. Let's start operating. And it's very effective for teams that are disciplined, consistent, and have a strong leadership team.
Yeah.
And so like, that's great. That totally works. And like, I would be a huge advocate for it. Please do it if you're doing nothing. But what I found is there's nuance and there's more complexity to strategic planning than is in that system at times. And other businesses need different things. And so what I did is I actually really experimented with some of the EOS tools. I experimented with some of the scaling up philosophies. Like I applied them, I tried them, I put them into practice. And what I found in particular is there's a few categories where, the framework might be there. The framing is there. Like the strategic plan framing, like rocks, that framing, that's all good. Right. But it starts to fall apart if you don't have a disciplined leader who can pull that through. And there's some behaviors that associate with that. And there's some coaching that comes with that. And there's some, nuance to that. So like we've added a deliberate practice element, and which is kind of weekly work and different ways of tracking things. We've added different ways of thinking through kind of essential work. Like what is the most important thing that this person does in this particular role? And how do we trim things that are unnecessary? But really what we've found is there's kind of a framing centerpiece for your organization. And it kind of is what the bridge is between those 5 things. And so it really starts with, purpose, vision, right? It's like, why do we do what we do and where are we going? And then from there, you start to identify, well, what's our strategic identity? And we use that term. And strategic identity is essentially like, what's the one thing that strategically positions us differently that's going to inform all the other elements of our strategy, right? So it's different than the vision. The vision is where are we going? The strategy is, and what's our pathway? What's our strategic pathway for accomplishing that vision that makes us unique and different? And from there, then let's map out that strategic plan. But then you have to tie that to your core business and your target market, right? Like those 5 things have to line up. And then we also include kind of a profit plan tied to that. Like, and how are we actually going to be profitable as a business and how are we committed to profit? So we put those 6 kind of framing elements together. And then we make sure that all 6 of those things are swimming in the same direction, we like to say. And then we move into execution elements. And so how do we make these things come to life? Right. And so is this design and then execute side of things. And we're pretty particular about when those things happen and how those things happen. Similar to scaling up or EOS, right? Like we have meeting frameworks and we have, people plans and all these different things that other groups have. And what I've found is it's like, some people really like cilantro and some people don't.
Yeah.
Right? Some people really like EOS and some people don't. Like it just fits or it doesn't. And so we're not for everybody either. We're not saying the 5 facets is the universal truth and everybody's going to love it. It's like, no, there are certain people that's like, hey man, this is too complex. This is too involved. I don't enjoy this kind of framework. And other people are like, this is exactly what I've been looking for. It helps us in these categories. This really helps us align things. So I think with any one of those systems, it is kind of what works, what matches your general energy and aura and flow and behaviors as a team the best.
Yeah. Well, you really just explained it well too, because there are a lot of systems, but the system, they're not universal systems for business, even though they're sold universally. Sometimes people like to make you believe they really aren't. And you bring up a great point is, your team might not be right for this, but the other system could be right. Your 5 facets could be right, but it's an overlooked thing. I think when owners are contemplating this, because they may not simply know that there are different systems, and B, they may be sold into one. They may not want to look through more than one, and it really is a disservice, I think, because you mentioned one good thing here at the end. You've got to feel this vibe in this system. It's got to connect with you.
Yeah.
Because it's not like deciding to put a coat on for the rain outside. It's like, I am going to wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and work out for an hour before I start my day, kind of thing. It's that kind of commitment when you want to do one of these things, because it's not easy. So it better feel right.
Yeah. I mean, I love that you said that. And I think it is. It's like you have to know that this is something I can do every day, every week, because it is a system, right? It's like when you put in a new project management, like people use monday.com or ClickUp or Asana or different things. It's like, well, you can put the tool in, you can pay for the tool, you can get everybody in the system. It doesn't mean they're going to use it. It doesn't mean it's going to function well. It doesn't mean you're going to use all the, features of it, etc. So like, I think there is something of like, well, I know lots of people who are like monday.com is my thing. And we use ClickUp and we have a ClickUp expert on our team. Like ClickUp's our jam.
Yeah.
Some people swear by Asana. It's like, they're all good. They all accomplish the thing, right? Like they all can help you do what you need to do, but it really is like, which system fits our personality profile, which system really fits what we're doing. I want to back up for a second, because you mentioned the research piece. Like, how did we kind of get to the discovery?
Yeah.
And actually early on in having the consulting company, I was searching for an identity in many ways, right? Like kind of as I think a lot of coaches and consultants do who are kind of moving into the space. It's like, all right, well, am I an EOS guy? Am I a scaling up kind of guy? Am I a what? And actually one of the paths that I took that really taught me a lot was a fractional position. So I started jumping in as a fractional COO. I started jumping in as a fractional president. And what it showed me is like, instead of like working on one channel, right, I was kind of actually looking at lots of aspects of a business as a fractional person, but I still
Mm-hmm.
had the advantage of being an outsider because I wasn't there every day. I didn't have the same kind of
Yep.
social equity challenges or social status challenges that other people have. But I was able to kind of see it as a system because that was my job. My job was to come in and look at the system, but to be in it every day and to be facilitating team meetings. And so I really got a lot of perspective talking to not just the leadership of a company, but also leading team meetings as a fractional person and getting into the weeds and documenting things in project management systems and creating things. And that taught me a lot because I was involved in every aspect of a business system
Mm-hmm.
from an outsider perspective, not just inside. And I think that really has carried forward into the 5 facets. It's not, we start with the leadership team, of course, like we kind of do a lot of the
Yeah.
design things with the leadership team, but we're very thoughtful about, and how does this play out throughout your business? And so one other aspect that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is we, in the 5 facets, we talk about that as an operating element, but we also have a whole behavioral kind of leadership structure that we connect to it to say, look, this is a behavior framework that ties to the 5 facets. And if these behaviors are things that you can do, you're going to be effective. Like you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
able to do this operating system. The people in your team are going to be able to do this operating system. And so that kind of marriage between behavior and systems is really
Mm-hmm.
the approach we've seen effective. And it's where I've seen, implementations of EOS or scaling up or these other systems we've talked about. It's where I've seen them go well, and it's where I've seen them go badly, is when the behavior profile and the sustainability of behavior from a leadership team can't match the system.
Yeah.
And so we've really been thoughtful on that front about, okay, well, what are the behaviors that allow the 5 facet system, like that business velocity, to actually take place? And
Yeah.
so,
And
and
it's a
sometimes,
great point too. It's a great, and sorry, I cut you off
no,
from
you're
there because
good.
I'm just so excited about it, man. Because it is a great point because you're helping to identify whether or not they might be a good fit for you. Because you, as someone that's implementing something like this, I mean, you don't want to get 6 months down the road and realize this team is the wrong team for this.
Yeah. And I mean, the truth is, like, when you're hiring a consultant, when you're hiring us, for example, like we kind of enter your world for a period of time.
Yeah.
We're with you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a genuine business partnership and relationship. So we have, from a rollout perspective, like we do the assessment piece on the front, which is that causal mapping piece I was talking about earlier. So we learn a lot about your business. We like to say, that causal mapping process is like, if you and I were to go, like you live in Washington, I used to live in Washington State, like I loved hiking, like there were so many amazing trails and great opportunities. But if we went to a trail together and we, park in the trailhead, what's the first thing you and I do? We go look at the map and we are
Yep.
looking for something in particular, which is the "you are here" button, right? We can say, hey, we want to hike to the top of Mount Baker. We want to, hike to the top of Mount Shuckson. But if we don't know where we're starting from, we're never going to get to the top of that mountain. And so
Mm-hmm.
that causal mapping process is really a way for us to say, hey, where are we? Where are we on the map? Right. And to ground ourselves in that reality. And so we get pretty intimately connected with people pretty early in the process. And that's very intentional, right? Like the discovery part is
Yeah.
very much part of what we do, because when we do that, we all come from the same starting place. Right. So from a personality perspective or from a match perspective, like you have to be willing to let us come into your space and see some things. But when you do that, there's so much discovery, there's so much opportunity, there's so
Yeah.
much clarity. And then all of our kind of tools, methods, all those things that we can put into place become very personal and connected and allow you then to be yourself and lead the way that you want to lead, with clarity and alignment as the target. And so we used to kind of like do that if they were open to it. And now we're like, nah, we do this every time because
Mm-hmm.
it just makes the endeavor so much more effective. But kind of to the original question, like it is really, we are kind of in your space. So, it is a personality fit too. Like I'm not for everybody. I know that.
Yeah.
And, we've got different consultants on our team who come from different backgrounds, a different space, who aren't like me, right? Who come from
Mm-hmm.
different spaces for that very reason. right? Of like,
Yeah.
hey, you don't have to like me. It's not about me. It's, find somebody that's a good match for you, who's going to help you see things the way you want to see things, and push you to be better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting listening to you talk about this because, in our work, we're with an owner that has a desired exit. They want to leave their business in the next 5, anywhere from 2 to 10 years, really. But we're marching towards a value. We're doing those kind of things. But it's so interesting listening to you talk about your really understanding the behavioral profile of someone to make sure that you're a fit for them and they're a fit for you, because we spend a long time doing that just because of the fact that it is so difficult to really make the changes that we're often going to have to make to get a business to go from say 5 million in value to 15 million in value along the way. Not only just the growth itself in the growth, but the change in people, the change in process, the change in what the owner has to do.
Yeah.
Their role change throughout this is so dramatic. That's cool to hear you say that. And I think it really, to me, listen to that coming from you is very valuable for someone listening to this. Go out and talk to a bunch of different people. You won't hear people say very often what Dave's saying here. We want to understand your behavior profile to make sure it fits. You just don't hear that enough, I don't think, because there are different places that it's like we are universal. We can cover it. It's not. It's simply not.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I love
that's,
that I love that you shared a little bit about your work, and I love that you're supporting entrepreneurs in the exiting of their business. I actually partner with a similar type company over here in Charlotte called Exit DNA.
mhm.
Same idea, right? Like they're coaching entrepreneurs through this exit process. How many of them have done it before? Very few. It's a
Yeah.
monumental effort, right? It's scary, and it's like buying your first house, right? Like hopefully you have somebody saying like, no, 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 don't sign that document. Think about this,
Mhm.
right? Same kind of thing
Mhm.
in the exit process. And so part of our partnership with that organization is, and I imagine you're thinking about this as well, is the integration question, right? Like
Yeah.
to sell your business, most people think about, well, we got to get our balance sheet up. We got to get profit up. Like we got to maximize the financial aspect of this.
Yeah.
But from a strategic purchasing perspective, like the purchasers thinking, sure, yeah, the finances have to be in order. Absolutely. But also like what strategic value does this apply to our organization? How hard is it going to be for us to integrate this group into what we do? Right. So our, kind of supporting of those types of organizations and the work that you do is all about, hey, if you have a system that you're coming in with, you are 10 times easier to integrate with than if you made
Yep.
stuff up. Right. If you made stuff up, if you don't have this thing shored up, if you don't have a system in that place, if you're winging it over here, you're going to lose value on the exit side. You just
Mhm.
are, because you're more difficult to deal with later, and they're going to know that, right? They're going to
Yeah.
see that out. So I love that you mentioned that, because I think, for any entrepreneur who's interested in exiting, it's such an important aspect to be thinking about. How are we actually systematizing? How easy are we to integrate somewhere else?
Yeah, you make a great point too, Dave. This is something that should start early because
Yeah.
we'll come be working with owners that are in their business 10, 15 years or something like that, and they're in their 40s now, or they're in their early 50s. We don't, I mean, honestly, most of our people aren't much older than their mid 50s that we work with, because these are people that want to create wealth and do something else, right? It's like, hey, I want to create wealth. I want to take some money off the table. I want to do some philanthropic things, and I want to go do something else, start a business, hang with my kids, whatever it is. So the earlier that an entrepreneur or founder or a business owning group, doesn't really matter, the earlier you contemplate what you're talking about and putting a system in place, the more you have time to really mature that system and make it effective and get it as part of your ingrained culture and let it improve your performance over those years.
Yeah.
Because as you look at it, when you're working with people, what kind of performance increases are you seeing over a couple years or a few years working with these clients?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question, in part because I think the assumption at times of working with a consultant is, well, we need to grow revenue, we need to grow revenue, we need to grow revenue. Like we want to see that grow. And we've definitely had that. Like
Yeah.
we had a catering company that went from 1.7 to 2.3 in a year, because they started implementing some systems. We've had companies go from 750,000 to 2 million. Like
Yeah.
we can do that part. We can create the systems, we can create the structures, we can create the movement for that goal, but we also want to make sure that that's what you actually want,
Yeah.
right? So some people's vision is like,
Good
look,
point.
we're at 4 million, we have no interest in being at 10. Like those are two very different companies. Like you have to
Yes.
think differently from 4 million to 10 million or 750 to 2. Like it's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
And so you have to know that like that's what we want. And it comes back to that behavior piece. Like we talk about the hardest part for most business owners in that space is the transition from big dog operator mentality, we like to call it, which is like
Yeah.
flying, solving problems, doing everything, to like system structured and in your lane and letting other people fly around and solve the problems. That's a really difficult mental shift. And some
Huge.
people are just like, you know what? I like flying around solving problems. That's what I like to do. You're like, great. Let's just do that faster, easier, more efficiently so that you have more time to do the things you want to do in your life now with a $4
Yeah.
million business. Great. So I think that's really important to understand, like, well, what are you actually shooting for? That comes back to that kind of vision piece of like, what do we actually want here? So sometimes it is, we want to scale. We want to go from 4 to 10 or 4 to 6 or whatever that
Yeah.
number is. Like, great, we can organize ourselves to do that. But it's going to force me to push differently. I'm going to push you differently.
Yes.
Then
Yes.
we want to do 4 million and just be better at it, right? And just be streamlined. So,
Yeah.
I really love that. I love that you brought that up because I think that's really important. And I think as you were talking about starting early, like that integration process, like if you start that 6 months before an exit, or you start that, relatively quickly before an exit, like they're going to know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're not going to
It
be good
won't
at it.
work.
Yeah,
It
it
won't work.
doesn't work very well. Like we often recommend, like if you're thinking about an exit, start 3 years ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like start 3 years early, get the systems in place, get good at it. Not only will you see kind of velocity on the growth side, but you're going to see streamlined, easy efficiency, more time to actually navigate the exit component. Like that's a new full-time job when you start courting
Oh
relationships,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
like data centers, all the things that you have to create to do that
Yeah.
is a whole different job.
Yeah, it is. And you brought up a couple things first. And this cannot go without me talking about this, because you said a $4 million is way different than a 10 million or whatever the exact numbers you use,
Yeah.
because of the amount of change. This is something that every business owner at first will say, oh, I want to be this big. And then you realize they come down and they realize, do you realize that that's 2 jumps in where you're at, or that's 1 jump from where you're at? And what that means is your business has to look like this.
Yeah.
Are you really ready for that? And just letting them work through that piece of it, because when someone comes to us and they say, listen, I want to be a platform investment company. That's how I want to sell my business, right? I want to get it over
Yeah.
5
Yeah.
million in EBITDA, right? And they're say 2 million or 3 million now. And we say, that's a completely different thing. You know this, right? You have to be board level at that point. So that's about your involvement. We have to hire a CEO. We have to get that executive team in place to develop and execute a 5-year strategy without you.
Yeah.
Are you ready for that?
Yeah.
And the all the stuff, the associated stuff that we have to do. And it's like you said, sometimes people just say no,
Yeah.
because growth in and of itself is not what we're all should be about. We should be about, what happiness and really what makes us, fulfills us the way we do them. Because I'm in the exit business, right? But I tell so many people that your best thing for you is to run your business until you don't want to run it anymore and
Yeah.
close it. There's no reason you have to sell your business. Plan ahead and do the way you want to do, and do what makes you happy. Use a system like you're talking about, the 5 facets that can make your business run so much better for you. And do as you said, do the things that you really enjoy. Maybe, Tuesday afternoon golf is your deal. If you're slave to your business, you're not going to do Tuesday afternoon golf very much. But if you get your business running right, it can be every week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You're kind of poking at I just had this conversation yesterday with a company that, the two founders who have been running it for 20 odd years, right?
Yeah.
They're amazing. They have created an incredible company, and they're transitioning to retirement, and their son's taking over the business, right? And they're thoughtful about that, and they're thinking about that. But like, it's actually the part we started talking about is like, it's actually an identity shift. Like, your
Yes.
identity has been the founder, owner,
Yeah.
operator of this business. Now you have to be something else. And it comes back to the kind of coaching behavior side of things. And I think where we take a lot of time, energy, and care in working with clients in the 5 facets is it's not just a systems implementation. It's also, hey, we are working with you as a leader to see yourself, to identify like, what is my identity and who do I want to be in this company and how might I need to shift. But we're not kind of walking you to the cliff edge and just pushing you and saying, all right, figure it out if it works, right? And I think some of the system implementation business models are like that. I think EOS can feel like that for certain.
Feel like that, definitely.
Certain implementers kind of do that, certain implementers don't. So I'm not trying to label everybody that way.
Yeah.
But we really are different in the sense it's like, hey, we're going to walk you to the edge of the cliff, but then we're going to put your harness on and we're going to make sure that the ropes are working, and we're going to check your carabiner a couple times, and like, we're going to rappel down next to you as you get on the process.
Yeah.
Like, and we're a little bit more hands-on than some of those other system implementation. And I think if that appeals to you, if that's something where you're like, look, I want somebody to come with me on this journey, I don't want to do it alone, we can be a great fit for that. Because it is hard. It is like, you have to almost think so differently than how you thought before if you want to go from 4 to 6 or 6 to 10, whatever that, or, working full-time to retired. All of those are very different stages of life and take different ways of thinking. So we take a lot of care in that. Like, we really want to make sure that the human is involved in that process, not just, this is a business. People run businesses.
Yeah. That's so cool. I just want to say thanks, Diane. Great to see you today. Diane's a frequent listener. Thanks for being here. She's listening to us off of X. So that's good today. Thank you. If you've not been through this, like you and I've been through this, different parts in business owners' lives, or times in business owners' lives, or phases, these kind of things are big shifts, right? And I love how you're spending the time with them to do that. And then we're talking about it today, because I think if someone's listening today, they can at least sit back and really kind of soak that in and go, okay, is something like this for me? Because it's not for everybody. I mean, if you're good with where you're at, there's not a reason to change. That's for sure. So when you get down the road with some of these founders, what are some of the things that they're telling you? I mean, what are some of the good things they're telling you? What are some of the things that they're challenged by too?
Yeah, it's a really good question. With anybody, we see what we call the resistance, which is, Joseph Campbell has this leader journey, he calls it. And there's 17 steps. And I honestly don't remember all 17. I remember the first 2 very well. The first one is kind of the call, like you're being called into something else, which is our job, right? Like, my job is to say, I see this, and in order to do what you want to do, you need to be here, right? And when I say that to people, there's almost always resistance. And that resistance is the part 2 of that journey, right? Like, the refusal of the call is part 2 in the journey, which is, well, that's not going to work. Or, yeah, but I'm really worried about this thing over here. Right. It's like, and that's so human and so normal.
Yes.
So good. Like, we have no problem with the resistance. It's like, no, actually, please resist it, because it'll teach us a lot about how to support you and how to walk with you in this journey in a way that's safe and thoughtful and caring and meaningful. Right. But our job is to see those things, to call attention to it. So we do what we call kind of observation plus curiosity. And so in our coaching engagements, and we often work with teams and we work with individuals kind of we do team meetings, but we also kind of are supporting individuals in between those team meetings.
Yeah.
And we do what we call observation post-career. Hey, well, here's what I hear you saying. I'm observing X. Like, I'm observing that you're focusing on the financial part, but really what I'm hearing you say is you're concerned about safety when you retire. Like, you're concerned about feeling safe because right now you have a lot of control over your destiny. You're the CEO, but as you think about retiring, you have less control over what that finance situation is. Is that true? And so the curiosity part is like, so tell me more about what that is. It's like, you're just kind of inviting people to like, hey, show me what your resistance is. And I'm just going to invite you into the story. Like, so show me the other side of the story. So now I'm going to ask you, okay, so you might feel unsafe in this situation, but when do you feel safe? Like, what does safety look like for you? Well, I feel
Yeah.
safe when I can do this, when I can do this, and when I can do this. It's like, okay, well, now we're kind of starting to create a roadmap for the things we need to solve for. So now we need to think about, okay, well, you feel safe when you have a voice in the process or when you know in advance, you're not surprised by things that are coming. Okay, so how can we build in some practical ways of informing each other before things happen, of identifying, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So that, those are some real things that I heard. Some other things that I've heard are, I guess maybe one of the toughest situations I've been in recently is a leader who's unwilling to see it. Like they just can't go there. And I'm gonna say something that's gonna sound a little crass. It's gonna start crass, but end better, I promise. Is I have an executive coach friend and colleague who's just an amazing executive coach. But he said this to me a couple months ago, and he's like, everybody's a toddler. Like, everybody's a toddler at some point in time. Even the CEO of Microsoft is a toddler sometimes.
We all are.
I'm a toddler daily, right? So and it's funny because since he said that to me, I'm like, oh yeah, this is just 5-year-old this person showing up in this conversation. It gives you so much empathy for that person of like, oh, you're just a kid, right? And I'm just a kid sometimes. So like, how do I see you differently? But like when you start to see resistance for what it is, which is a protective, like I'm afraid of losing what I'm comfortable with. Like, people don't fear change, they fear loss. And I think that's a really important thing to understand when you're working with business or where you're working with yourself. It's like when you transition your business, you are losing something. You are gaining, but you are also losing. What you're losing is this comfortable thing that I know, that I have social status in, that I have all this stuff built up and around. I have to be willing to let that part go in order to become this new thing. And that's really difficult. That's really difficult. So we try to bring in, like I said, just kind of a lot of empathy and understanding for and care for that. Like, it's not just, well, yeah, but if you did this, you could be here. It's like people are less motivated by possibility than they are by loss aversion. That's, Tversky and Kahneman's work, right? So it's like, well, we have to give homage to the loss part. So I want to meet you there too, right? And then encourage you and push you through that.
That's cool. That's so, and it's, wow, I'm glad you went through that. I am, because it's well, people listen to it today. You can go, now I understand why I'm feeling this way. Because it is, whatever, you can call it toddler, you can call it don't want to move, whatever it is. It's being afraid of that loss. And it is so comfortable for business owners. They could have done that thing for 10 plus years and come the same way, been successful. And that is the real thing that I think compounds it, is that I've been successful doing what I'm doing. Why do I want to change?
Yeah.
So there's so many things that are, oh gosh, such a great conversation with you today, Dave. I appreciate you stopping by today, because we're running out of time, but we're going to have you back, because I think we're going to have some more fun talking about different things. But I'm so glad that we were able to connect today. So Dave, what's new and exciting with you guys in 2024 that you want to share with people today?
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my own kind of mental transition over the last couple of years. Like I mentioned, we didn't release the 5 Facets until November. And part of that is because I resisted, like I've always been kind of a referral based, connecting with people that I know type business. And that's always been good. But what we saw was a lot of momentum, and what we saw is growth year over year over year. And at some point it was kind of like, okay, like either we scale or we scale back. Like either we go up or we have to go backwards, because right now I am working way too much, way too hard, with way too many people. Like
Yeah.
I can't sustain this. So it either needs to get bigger than me or I need to calm down, was kind of the decision. And so I resisted that for probably 18 months. Like it took me a long time. But we've now kind of brought the five facets into the world. And so there's a couple of things I'm really excited about. One is, we're really leaning into the content. Like we're creating a bunch of blogs, we're creating a bunch of content, downloadable materials that just anybody can use, that are small
Yeah.
things, quick tools. But we're also starting to build out some mastermind communities, and we're
Hmm.
starting to build out a coaching process in addition to the consulting world that we do. So instead of us kind of coming into your business, if you're just looking for support, if you're looking for other people to connect, we're going to be launching that in mid-April. So that's a
Nice.
new endeavor for us. We've already got some interest, and these are for folks that are like, hey, yeah, I'm carrying a lot of this weight by myself. My leadership team may not be willing to do this thing, but like I could really use some support. And we found so many of those people over the years and just never had a place to put them in a meaningful way. So we're launching that in April, and I'm really excited about that. But I would say, one of the things that we just recommend for anybody, and this isn't like you have to work with us if you do this kind of a thing, we have an assessment on, if you go to fivefacets.biz, biz, fivefacets.biz, we have an assessment right at the top, and you can take that assessment. It's 26 questions, takes 5 minutes, but really it's like an organizational health assessment. And it just
Hmm.
gives you a snapshot of where are we really strong, where are we not as strong as we thought we were going to be. And you can take that assessment, you get automatic output, like you get the results right away. If it was something you wanted to process through, you can absolutely set up a meeting with me or somebody else on the team.
Hmm.
But we just recommend people, I take that assessment for us monthly, for our
Okay.
own business. I look at it
Awesome.
every month because I'm like, okay, I'm thinking, and I often have a bias. I'm like, oh no, this is really great. So when my team takes it and they're like, well, actually, this isn't as good as you think it is. Right. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh,
Well, we
that's a
need to
great
get
point.
into that category. So I just strongly recommend, like, take assessment, be in it, know where you are, level set, because it teaches you a lot about, like, this is where we are and this is where we need to go. So more
Yeah.
information will be coming out about the masterminds and coaching. We're really excited about that. So that those pages are being built right now, and they're going to be out relatively soon. But I always recommend kind of jumping in with the assessment piece and getting started there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Dave, I want to thank you for being here today on the Faces of Business, and for people that didn't know, it's Dave Newell from the Evolve Leadership Consulting. We were talking today about transforming business chaos into a dance of success. Dave was going through the 5 facets of business. Go back, listen to some of this. He dropped a lot of great advice through there. He talked about resistance to change. He talked about making sure you've got a fit with your team and the system you're looking at to put in your business. He talked about some of the benefits of doing it and the way that they work with clients. So, Dave, thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. You're honestly a really great host. I appreciated the questions. I appreciated the dialogue. Thanks for being such a great host.
Well, I'm just happy that we could talk today. And I want to thank Diane for being here today, and everyone else that was listening and didn't drop their comment in today. Thank you for being here. We
Yeah.
appreciate you. Go back and listen. And if you ever have any questions, reach out to Dave or myself and we'll get them answered. Dave, just hang out for a moment and we'll catch up while we're offline.